And just before we do start in on our topic of reading comprehension today, I just want to take a moment to remind people that we have recently had a few upgrades to the ActivInspire software, as well as the active drivers. So we're now up to ActivInspire version 2.7.66643 and active driver version 5.14.14. It's really important to keep up to date with your versions of both, as features are added in or wee bugs are corrected and things are generally tweaked to make your experience using Promethean software and hardware as smooth as possible. To check what version you're running, for Windows, you need to go up to the top of your screen like I am here to the Help button, then choose About, and you'll see at the top of this box that's popped open the version number that I'm running. The driver you find in your Active Manager, which is down in the bottom tray. Mine's in this little extra box. So when you're plugged into an active board or an active panel, you would see this same whiteboard symbol with the little yellow flame in it. Okay, go to your control panel, and at the bottom there is the driver version. So Mac users, the difference for you is that instead of clicking on Help, you click on ActivInspire. At the top you have an ActivInspire button. You would click on that and then go to Help or About, I think. And your Active Manager is up the top, not down in the bottom tray like for Windows. So you'll find that up there. Okay. You should be prompted to update your software automatically, but if you've somehow managed to turn that function off, up in the Help option you have a Check for Updates button, or alternatively you can go out to our support site, so support.prometheanworld.com, and you click on the Software Solutions option at the top there, and you can download Inspire by clicking here, or the active driver for whatever type of computer you have there. Okay, right, without further ado, we'll go back. All right, now some schools have got complete lockdown on their computers, so teachers are unable to make any changes or updates for themselves. So if that's your situation, you'll need to ask your IT technician or your IT services people to do these updates for you. And I know that can be a challenge sometimes, so good luck. All right, let's crack on. Here's our agenda for today. So as you can see, I've been completely overambitious when I was planning what I would cover today. So in order to fit everything in, or to fit what I have fitted in, I've cheated a little bit. I've gathered together examples to share with you that might cross over these comprehension strategies. So one example might cover 2 different strategies, for instance. I've also had to chop out a couple of strategies. So you can see there I've crossed out 2 of the strategies that, or several of the strategies there, but 2 lines that we won't be covering today, because I've decided that I wanted to do them justice, and I'll probably also include more visualizing and more predicting in a second webinar at a later date. It won't be the next one because the next one is on ClassFlow, that's already scheduled, but it'll be at a later date. So do join us again for that. Okay. Now I'm going to motor through stuff today because Laurie is on my back to make these much quicker. I still want to share lots of goodies. I will be going fast. Don't forget we record this. So you'll get sent a link to the recording. It'll be in the next couple of days. And you can watch it at any time on our YouTube channel, our Promethean ANZ YouTube channel. All right. So to kick us off, I just wanted to touch on a few useful tools or skills that will help you make some great comprehension activities really easy and really quickly. I've really tried to focus on the practical, the things that can be made really quickly, because I know time is a huge issue for us teachers, and I want them to be useful and functional, and most importantly, I want the pedagogy behind them to be sound. pretty much all of the examples that I've put together have been created with the intention of having students up at your active board or your active panel doing the activities, either paired or group work, with the exception of this first thing I'm going to show you, which would be more of a whole class modelling check-in sort of session. All right, so using scanned text, scanning stuff, whether it's pictures, whether it's text, scanning is usually quick and easy. Most schools have got a photocopier that teachers can scan on and then email the scans to themselves. So imagine I've done that. I'm going to go out to my desktop with my desktop tools. So the blue square with the tools icon on top of it, at the top of my toolbar there, I click on that, it takes me up to my desktop, and always when I use that icon, I get a small round toolbar that lands in the middle of your desktop. If you've got a really cluttered desktop, which some of us do have, it'll always be found in the middle if you can't see it. So here's my PDF emailed to myself, and I've scanned a reader here, and I couldn't fit the whole page on my small scanner, so I've had to do 2 scans, and I'm going to put them together now. So I'm going to use my camera tool. I'm going to come out and around to the area screen recorder, or sorry, the area snapshot tool, because I just need a square shape. I don't need to trim it out in any fancy way. All right, so I'm just going to drag a box to capture this part of the scan. I'll just move that aside so we can see. And here are the places I can send my snapshot to. I just want to put it onto my current page in my flip chart, so that's what I'm going to do there. And then I'm going to go and get the second part of the book, which is actually up here, or the second page rather, and I'll do the same thing there. I'll just move this box across. Okay, and to my current page. Now back on this little toolbar, I get back into my flip chart using that flip chart and pen icon there. And you notice that when you hover over anything with Inspire, you always get a tooltip, so it tells me what to do. Okay, and here I have my 2 scans. They've been a bit sneaky and enlarged a bit, so I'm just going to shrink them down. Okay, and put them side by side like so. And there are the pages of my reader. Okay, now I could, if I wanted to, group those. So I've selected both of them with my mouse cursor, and then I use this button here that I'm hovering over with the 2 green squares. When I click on that, it's grouped. Okay, in this instance, however, it's not really too important that the pages are grouped together. It's more important that I lock them down onto the page so they don't move, because I might be wanting to do stuff, as I'm going to show you, on the page, and I don't want this moving around in the background accidentally. So I'll position it there, and I'm going to use my cheats right-hand click, or the object edit menu, as it's officially called, and I'm going to lock that down. And now those pictures don't move around, or the scanned images and text don't move around. Okay, so for this sort of activity I'm about to show you, this would be more your shared text or shared book kind of stuff, where you might be just simply at the most basic level grabbing a pen, and you might be looking at the punctuation or the grammar or the language feature on the text, and you might be circling, underlining, you might be highlighting, whatever it is, okay, like so. Right, I'll just take those annotations off. It might be that you want to cover up all of the text and just be modelling or looking at the images, in this instance, because it's a junior reader, to be helping with predictions. So I might come to my shape tool. Obviously, I'd do this before, I'd set this up before I did it with the students. I just grab a rectangle. I've made it a black outline and a black inside. That's what the colours stand for there. And then I'm just going to drag a little shape here, okay, and that now allows us to just focus on the images, okay. It could be that I use instead one of the tools in here, the revealer tool, okay. Back in our day, or my day, teachers used to use overhead projectors and they'd put a piece of A4 paper on and slowly slide it across or up and down, and that's what the revealer tool basically does. It allows you to have a look at part of your screen. This is especially useful for this example. It's good for if you have text on one side and an image on the other side. It's excellent for that. In this instance, I might want to use instead my spotlight tool. Okay, you've got quite a few presentation tools here. Let's use a square spotlight. The spotlight tool is moved by dragging anywhere in the black on the screen. You can resize it and, oops, I accidentally right-clicked there, sorry. You can resize it. Oh, I did it again. I'm so sorry. I'm using Windows on my Mac, and my mouse pad does funny things. But I can basically, you can see my photos there. I can move that spotlight around and just look at pieces of the image or pieces of text as I see fit. Okay. You could do the opposite. So I can use it. Oh, I can use it to block out instead. Let me get rid of the images I've accidentally taken. Apologies for that. I can use it to black out the text, but I can only do one spotlight at once. So if I wanted to block out both bits of text, as you can see, it was just easier to use rectangles. Okay, so at a very, very basic level, scanning your shared text or your shared book, you've got some very simple tools that you can be using over top of that. Now, the reason I wanted to just touch on this, being able to get an image or a scanned anything into your flip chart is really useful. Okay, it's a good skill to have, so I just wanted to recap that skill. This next skill, a contain anything container, I've probably used it several times in the past, and the reason I'm revisiting it today is because I think it can be really, really useful. What we're seeing at the moment in terms of technology going into classrooms, people are moving away obviously from the projector-driven active boards and whiteboards, interactive whiteboards, and they're going for touch panels, active panels. So one of the things that's really evident when Laurie and I are talking to schools and Chelsea are talking to schools and going out into schools is people are really aware, teachers in schools are really aware now of flexible learning environments. So they're wanting technology that will fit into this space. An active panel or a touchscreen panel is ideal for this. And what we're finding people are moving a little bit away from having the idea of them as a front of room device. You obviously can still use your active panels as a front of room device, but they're not buying one bigger one, they're buying two medium-sized ones or a medium-size and a smaller so that they could have two panels in one room. Wouldn't that be lovely? And they're putting them on mobile stands rather than fixing them on the walls so that they're maneuverable and you can have that flexible learning space. The panels have such a great quality of picture that they can still be used as a front of room device when needed for modelling and check-in moments and things like that, but they're ideal for small group situations like at reading time. Apart from the stands being mobile, what we're also finding is people are opting towards the height adjustable stands, so that ones that go up and down so that you can have it lower for shorter people and taller as is needed. But those stands also rotate so that you can tip the panel back and have it as a table. And this is really great because you can use it as a type of interactive table, but the problem with this is that you're still running the panel off the computer. So if I look at my screen here, I've got the top of the screen, and it wouldn't matter if I laid this down flat, it's still got a top of the screen. So you have to be a little bit clever about the way you're setting up activities if you want to use your panel in this way. And the contain anything container is ideal for this. So I'll stop talking about it. It'll all become clear in a moment. I'll make one and show you what I mean. Right, you can use anything to be a container. I'm going to use a shape because it's really easy. So I'll come to my shape tool over here. I'm going to choose a rectangle. I'm going to choose it to be, I don't like those colors, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose it to be pale green in the middle and black on the outside, and I'll have a thin outside. So I now draw my shape. There we go. And I select it. I then go into my browser, and remember, if your browser is missing, it is Command B for Mac or Control B for Windows or View browsers to bring it back. Okay, and in my browser, I'm going to go to the white page at the top there. Okay, this is your property browser. Notice that I've got all of these different headings here. That's because I've got this item selected on the page. If I don't have that selected, I've got different headings here. That's because these are now page properties. To get object properties, I need to have the object selected. I'm just going to roll these in because really the only thing I need open is container. So I change this top box or this top option from can contain nothing to can contain anything. And that is done. That is how simple it is. So it's a click, and a click. 3 steps, and you've got a contain anything container. Now this means that anything that I might write in that container, or any text that I might drag into that container, or any image that I might add to that container, no, I should have done a different color, but never mind, will now travel around with it anywhere on the page. Okay, I can take these out at any time, I can put them back in. Okay, I can put them in another container on the page. And where this is useful is for an activity like this. So if you can imagine that I've tilted my flat screen active panel horizontally like a table, now my students can sit anywhere around the screen. In these little contain anything containers is a question that I've put in there. Okay, I'll explain the activity in a minute. And they can be rotated. Now, I'm not plugged into a touch screen. If I was, I'd just use my fingers and twiddle them around, but I'm going to have to rotate them. And they can be read at any angle because they can be dragged around anywhere on the page. And the idea here is that this is an activity for activating prior knowledge. Okay. As I'm sure we all know, prior knowledge is what the students bring with them to the reading experience. It's the knowledge they already have about the reading process and text types, but it's also knowledge that they might have about a topic, concept, language, vocabulary, basically the world around them. So obviously, by activating their prior knowledge, we're going to help the students make connections with what they already know, and then they can build on that foundation as the lesson progresses. We can also help them make connections between their prior knowledge and the actual text, which can be tricky for some students. So as I said, this is a bus stop activity using contain anything containers. Now, if you don't have the ability to flip your active panel or your active board, because you might still have an active board, you'd simply leave your containers around this way, and they can still be pushed around and pulled around the screen as needed. Yeah, so that's still a usable idea. All right. Incidentally, let me just reset this. These little icons here are action objects, and they turn on different tools, as you can see. So it went from pen to mouse cursor, and the reason I've put them sort of on the page here is because if I did have this flipped down as a table and the kids were all sitting around, I wouldn't want them having to reach over to try and share a toolbar or anything. So to get those, they're in your action browser under drag and drop, and you've got a whole selection of tools that you can just pull onto the page. If you want to make them bigger, because sometimes I think they're a bit smaller, you can just resize them as you wish, okay? And it'll just turn on that tool for you. So they're quite a useful little thing there. All right, let's move on. So I'm going to construct a type of senses chart. So again, another idea for activating prior knowledge, but it's also a good one for visualization, and I'll go into that in a moment. Now, just to show you shortcuts, because I'm all about the shortcuts, I've already got containers over here set up. What I'm going to do is right-click and copy, and I'm going to come onto this page, and I'm going to say right-click and paste, and I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, and what I'll do is go into my library under backgrounds, and I'm just going to pull on a different background so that this stands out a bit more. Now, one thing I should have made clear about containers need to be underneath the things that you want them to contain, and they need to be big enough to contain the things that you want them to contain. All right, so at the moment, this image will not be contained in this container because the container came onto the page after the image. So to change that, all I need to do is right-click on it, go to Reorder, and I'm going to put it in the bottom layer, and that means that anything else pretty much that I'm going to put on the page is going to sit over top of it and therefore will be contained in it. Here we go. If I was to leave an image hanging over the edge of the container like that, it's not going to be contained. It has to be wholly inside the container, if that makes sense. Okay. Now, once I've made one, all I need to do is duplicate that one, and it's going to have the same properties as the other container, the original container. So it will be bottom layer, and it will be set to be a container. So always just make one and duplicate it. If you want them to be different colors, it's not a problem. You just use your flood fill, change the color. There we go. So we've got a little activity here for senses, a senses chart, if you will. As I said, good for activating prior knowledge, but also good for visualization. So the idea is that the children or the students are given a topic, and I actually didn't explain that on that last page, did I? And there are the questions about the topic that they're about to read about. Sorry about that. So in this instance, you're giving them a topic or a phrase that is going to activate prior knowledge for something they're going to read about. So it might be the beach, for instance. They could be reading a poem or a story about a beach, and you're trying to encourage their prior knowledge to help with the decoding of the vocabulary, or to help them make sense and make connections with the text that they're about to read. But I was saying that this is good for visualization. So as I'm sure we all know, visualizing or visualization is that little movie or the pictures that we get running through our heads about a story or text when we're reading it. And the pictures are different for everyone, even though we've all read the same words. So our senses can add to or extend our understanding or interpretation of the text. And so by encouraging the students to think of the 5 senses, sight, smell, taste, touch and hearing, we can encourage them to think deeper and visualise perhaps more than they would normally. Now, you might already use Senses charts in this way for reading. Perhaps you ask your students to fill in a worksheet chart already, but I like the idea of this activity being done collectively or collaboratively so that there can be a lot of discussion and ideas introduced by their peers that perhaps students hadn't thought of before. So obviously they're working here at the board. Now, if my scenario is that I've got a wall mounted or just a simply vertical mounted board, which is probably 99% of us out there, it'd be nice to all have the tilted mounts, I'm sure. You may or may not be aware that with the latest versions of ActivInspire, you have up to 10 points of touch when you're using an active panel. Okay, so 10 kids could be writing at the same time, in other words. So it makes it an ideal activity to be done collaboratively. Now, I'd do 2 of these charts. I would do one prior to reading to activate all that prior knowledge. And then what I'd do is I'd either do a second chart for afterwards, or I'd get the kids to add in a different colour after their reading anything else that they might have learnt along the way or knowledge that they've picked up along the way that will then be their prior knowledge if they ever come to this topic again. So I've talked and shown sort of a middle upper primary use with this one, but let's think about lower primary or kinder use. So it might be that the students are not able to write coherently yet, or that they might struggle with this. So remember that these are containers that can contain anything, and it could include images. So it might be images that the students have drawn themselves, like this wonderful picture of the sun that I am putting together there. As long as it will fit within the container, there we go, and move around with it, it can go in there. It could be images that they've found and pulled out of the resource library, or it could be that they're going to record their voice. So in your toolbox, under More Tools, you have a sound recorder. So I'm going to hit go here, and it might be, we're talking about the beach. I don't think we can taste sunshine or hear it or smell it. We might feel it. I might add it to that one. So it might be that we taste the salty water. Okay, and they can add their soundbite to the relevant box there. Okay, there's lots of different ways that we can record information on a chart like this, and the idea of having them in moving parts is so that the kids don't have, they can pass them to one another. They don't have to always be moving around each other on the board. Let's stretch this idea further up the curriculum levels now. The idea of recording their voice. If you've got upper primary or extension reading groups, you might want to add more detailed information, or the kids might want to be adding more detailed information. For example, maybe you're asking them to use similes or metaphors in their notes. There's only so much space available in the container to write or to draw, so using their voices on the sound recorder would be a really good option there. Okay, I'm going to jump right up the curriculum level now. So this is an HSC example, and using the same idea of these contain anything containers, let's have a quick look. This time we're not activating prior knowledge, but we're beginning to analyze it and evaluate text. So this icon up here, this PDF, is an area of study. It's a reading and then a writing task. Obviously, I was looking at the reading aspect of it. And in it, the students were asked, amongst other things, to identify in a piece of writing, this piece of writing here, the conflicting notions of belonging and not belonging. The actual questions they were asked are in the notes files are here. Remember, you can download this flip chart from Promethean Planet in a couple of days' time. We'll probably also send you the link to where you can download that from, so you don't even have to go searching for it. But once again, I've chosen to make this a collaborative activity that a group of students would do together. I'm a huge advocate of collaboration, and by collaboration I mean face-to-face, discussing and working through things together in a big shared space, such as at the active panel and active board. So I've broken this reading task down, and I gave the students two containers here, belonging and not belonging. One is to identify examples and extracts or evidence of where the author has shown the sense of belonging, and one obviously for not belonging. Now this may seem a little simplistic on the surface, but essentially the first step in them being able to answer those questions on the text is that the students need to be able to identify in the text where the author has actually shown this. So again, in the same way, they could, if they wanted to, handwrite notes in there. Okay, there's another tool I didn't show earlier called handwriting recognition. Now this is going to come on and convert my scribbles to the last size, style and colour, so I'll just make that a reasonable, we'll make it black. There we go. Okay, handwriting recognition in my toolbox. And I'll just grab my tablet now. My writing's going to be very messy with this, I apologise. Did I turn that on? Yes. Okay, so let's say we're looking for a sense of not belonging. There we go, solitary driving. Oh, oh, I'd be better to do it without my tablet. Sorry, let me try again. As you can see, it's not so great to use off a board. I'm just going to write solitary. Okay, didn't go like that in my practice, it went perfectly. All right, but the idea is it converts to text any of your scribbly writing. So when you're at the panel, at the board, that is ideal. You can then drag the text in as you need to. That's great, but with such a comprehensive or complex text and being quite a few examples, it might be that they opt for voice recording of ideas and put them in there. That's good in itself, except if you want to then use these for notes at a later date. So another option that you've got, and if you're wanting bigger chunks of text, is if at any time you've got typed text on the page, so this is an actual text box, if you double click, it'll open the text box. And you can then click and drag to select text that you want. I've let go of that. Then I come back and click on it and I drag it out and it makes me a copy, which is quite cool. Okay, now that's not going to fit in my box very easily, my container, so I'm just going to resize that by using the bubbles on the other end, and I'm going to use that small star. It's a really good way of quickly shrinking text. Using the this resize does nothing. It resizes the text box, not the text. And so then I can get slightly bigger quotes out of that text if I want to. Okay. Now, we could use those containers in that way if we wanted to. once again, if I have the luxury of flipping this over and lying my panel flat like a table, there's nothing to stop me having multiple ones of these and 2 lots of text, although this is, you know, it will be getting quite small on the page. But in this instance, I've created it for a vertical board. I'm going to get rid of those, however, because I might not want, I might not want the containers idea. What I might want to do is make the text itself into a container, which is something you can do because you can make absolutely anything into a container. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go into my property browser, go to containers, and change that. Oh, I've already done it. Whoops, I did have a practice run. Okay, so it now is a contain anything container, and that means that if I have my pen tool turned on, and I'm going to make it a bit skinnier, and I'm going to actually also use my pen modifier because I just can't stand wonky lines, so I'm going to underline. So it could be that I now am underlining like this, or it could be that I'm using my highlighter to highlight in a straight line, okay, the parts of the text that I want. If I'm now I knew I was going to do that. Let me just make that a little bit bigger. I made my lines too close to the edge. Oh, maybe I turned off contain anything container. Right. What have I done? Let's start that over again. Can contain anything. All right. Clear annotations. Let me not use my line. Let me just circle things. Have a look. Is that going to work? Yes. All right. So it didn't like my underlining. Should have liked my highlighting though. All right. The idea is that you can get pen to move with the text, because what you don't want to happen is what happened before, where I moved the text out of the way and all my pen got left behind. So if I'm wanting to, obviously not underline, but if I'm wanting to circle things and make notes on top of the text, that's all well and good. I can do that like so. Should be able to do that. Let's have a look. Yes. I don't know what was going on before. Now, the reason I had the text quite small, if you were looking at this on an interactive whiteboard or an active panel, you'll be seeing it and you should be able to read that fairly well. On my small computer screen, it looks quite small and is a little bit hard to read, but once it's projected, that's actually reasonably big. And the reason I wanted all of this space around the outside of it is because when you're analysing text and you're wanting to, for instance, write little notes, gosh, my my little drawing art tablet is really playing up. There we go. You're wanting to write notes all around the outside. Please excuse my scribbly writing. You can do that, but you might also want to link it to the text. So you can do that with connectors. So connectors are like stretchy joining lines. So I'm going to come and grab my connector, like so. I will do it red, okay, because this is one concept I'm going to talk about here. These are more examples of the same kind of concept. And then I might actually have different coloured pen, oops, different coloured pen for a different concept somewhere else. Okay, and I can join them in a different colour if I wish, like so. And connectors if I'm moving the text around the page to make room somewhere else, as you can see, the connectors stick with the text. And I can take it off one if I wish to and plonk it on something else instead if I've changed my mind. So just a few ideas on analysing text there that can be done. All right. I'm going to tempt you a bit off tangent there because I was talking about activating prior knowledge, and I have one last quick idea for activating prior knowledge to share. So here's a book that my students are going to read. It is a junior reader, junior class, and it's about bugs. So before I give them the text, I would set up an activity like this. And I've done that by going to my shapes. I've chosen a rectangle. I've chosen that X because I want it to be hollow. I don't want to colour inside. And I chose white, but I'll just quickly show you with black. And then I simply chose the vertical line there, down the middle like so. I then selected all of those and I locked them down onto the page so that they wouldn't move, okay? Because I'm going to be dragging items around the page, I don't want this frame to be moving around as well. I put a background on, so I just went into my resource library, into my backgrounds, I think it was in photograph, that one, the nice green one there, and I pulled on the green leaf. And backgrounds just pull on like so, okay? Then also from my resource library, I've gone in under the subjects area, and if you're missing the subjects folder, watch the video on the Promethean YouTube channel on how to get that. Under general, animals, and insects. There we go, that's where I got them from. You can also do a search up there for insects. And I basically just pulled on a selection, and very deliberately, I've made this an ambiguous task. What I'm wanting is the students to stand at the board together to discuss how they're going to possibly group this wide variety of insects or bugs into two groups. Now, it might be that they never actually reach a consensus, and that's okay, because the actual aim of this activity is not to get anything right or wrong. There is no right or wrong to this. It is about encouraging that discussion of the attributes of the insects, the roles of the insects, you know, what features they have. So all of that lovely language is coming out and activating all of that prior knowledge. So the idea is that they'll be sharing ideas and opinions or facts to negotiate and sort the bugs. So language and descriptions of the bugs will come out, even if the students don't come to a consensus about how to sort the bugs. All of the prior knowledge has come to the surface and been shared amongst the group. Now I'm just going to flick over to Laurie very quickly. Do we have any common questions so far, Laurie, or any questions that you haven't been able to answer?
So yeah, the one big one is about copyright and scanning.
Oh, goody. So, I'm glad that was raised. You do need to be careful. I know in all schools that I have worked in, the copyright policy has been laminated and placed above the photocopier. I believe it's something along the lines, and please don't quote me, but check it out for yourself, of 10% of the work. With the internet, it's really easy. Copyright images are really easy because you can do a search, and I'm quite up to play with that. But in terms of copyright with books, I believe you'll need to check in the individual books, but also whatever your school's policy, because schools always have policy about copyright. So hopefully that's probably not really answered anything for you in terms of what is the policy, but I know your school will have one and it should be displayed for you to see when it comes to printed books. When it comes to online images and online things, I think I've mentioned before to people that when you do a search, so let's say I was doing a search for insects. Okay, up here, when I use Google Chrome anyway, there's a little cog on the right and you can do an advanced search. And when that comes on, if you scroll to the bottom, there's usage rights. So I would want to be free to use or share, free to use, share or modify. I often just go for this one just to cover all bases. And you still find plenty of images out there. Okay, so now when you're doing it, you'll see up here it says these are all labelled for reuse with modification. You can also go through the Creative Commons website for other images like Flickr and things like that. Okay, no other questions there, Laurie? No? Okay. So, on to prediction, and we're only going to stop in really briefly on this. So we've looked a lot at activating prior knowledge as a strategy to help students build a foundation for their reading, to help them make connections in some way. And it's similar to, but not to be confused with predicting. So predicting is obviously the strategy where students are using clues to help them make smart guesses or educated guesses about what might be coming up in the text. And clues might be things like the title, the cover, the author's blurb or pictures. But it can also be text within the text itself. So we do use predicting before the text, as this example, or before reading rather, as this example is going to show. But you can also do it throughout. And in the next webinar I will include some further examples of this. But I've chosen this idea to share with you because it's a favourite. I used to do this in my classroom before the days of technology. With a big sheet of newsprint, or butcher's paper as they call it here in Australia, and the words were written on individual strips of paper, and the kids had a glue stick and a marker pen. Now here are individual words or phrases. Over here is my digital marker pen, so this probably wouldn't rate very highly on the SAMR model. At a stretch, it could be an augmentation level, but really I've just substituted technology directly for other tools. But I will justify this. Sometimes you just don't need to change an activity. This was already a good quality activity. It worked, the kids really enjoyed it, and so I simply made it on my computer. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, the idea is that there are keywords or phrases that you take out of the text. So the teacher takes those out and sets up. The students are working as a group to put these keywords back together to make a story out of them again. So they drag the words up as they needed them. Okay, in the old days they would glue the words down on the paper. And in between they would write with the marker pen any words that they needed to be able to make a story again that makes sense out of those words. Okay, so you might end up with something that looks like this. Okay. Now you have to be strategic in the keywords that you take out. You have to give the kids enough of a clue to predict a story. And what the kids really love is seeing how close or how accurate they did get to retelling or predicting what will happen in the text, and sometimes they're way out because they're just imaginative and they come up with these amazing stories. And in that regard, it's almost like you're activating prior knowledge a bit more with this activity than predicting. But usually you're looking as well at the cover of the book and things like that, maybe the author's blurb if it's older children, to help them get the basic story that they're going to put together. I've used a junior school fiction reader here, but it works well for all levels and for non-fiction text too. Okay, we can jump on to asking and answering questions. This example originally came from a wonderful teacher called Kristen Sanderson in Whangarei, and I've adapted it a teensy bit over the years. It looks at literal questions, but you can do the same type of activity for any type of question, for inference, for reorganization questions, for vocabulary or evaluation questions, whatever. In essence, you need to have some text on the page. So over here, Kristen used, she scanned, I'm sure she was allowed to, I'm sure it was copyright friendly, only 10% of the, or less than 10% of the complete document, a newspaper article, okay? And that's why I still use this one. I like that it's out of a newspaper. It's not a digital online story. This is actually a newspaper article that's been scanned and then put in. Great for if you're doing actual newspapers. You still get newspapers in schools to work with. I've checked on that. I like that idea. But you could have any type of text here. You could have scanned text like I did with the Greedy Cat reader earlier. You could have scanned an article or a poem or a story from a school journal or a reader or a page of a novel. You could even copy and paste text from a Word document or from a story online if you wanted to, provided you had the permission to. Okay, now we've got the text on the page, and over here we've got a rectangle. Now, in this instance, it's a rectangle, there's text on top, and it was grouped together before I ungrouped it. There we go. It was all grouped together, as you can see there. We could create just one rectangle here that is a contain anything container and drag the text in there. That wouldn't be a problem. But this was made in a previous version before Inspire. We had a different software, and I don't think that contain anything containers were available then. At the bottom here, I have added one of our contain anything containers, and I'll explain why later. But in essence, and the reason I like this type of activity so much is because regardless of the type of question you've got over here, the students are looking for the evidence in the text on this side. So this was simple to set up, plonk some text on, plonk some questions on. The students are here at the board working together to find in the text the answers to the questions, okay? They might do each question in a different colour. Yeah. Now the reason I've put this box at the bottom, one way I think that you can always tell students have really understood a type of question that they're being asked is if they then are able to ask that type of question back. So here we've got literal questions. I want the students to understand that literally they can find the answer in the text, so the question has to ask something that relates directly to a fact in the text. I want them to be able to write their own question down here so that they can then ask that back at the end of the lesson. And this moves up and down, so I would hope that, oh, I haven't made it a contain anything container, there you go. So they can hide their question if they want to, because I would hope that at the end of the lesson, in a plenary or at any stage when we're doing a check-in, they can share back their learning and understanding with the rest of the class and pull it up to share their questions back with the class. Now, there is only so much space in here, and children's writing can be haphazard sometimes. So, of course, they can use the sound recorder to ask their question verbally instead, or to ask several questions. Maybe they're each going to come up with a question, and you're going to end up with 5 or 6 in here, depending on how many kids are in the group. So essentially, it's just a very easy to set up activity. Text on one side, questions on the other. They're grabbing the highlighter and they're finding that evidence in the text. Same sort of ideas here for inference. So the student's going to have text on one side, and this time they're going to have a graphic organizer, but they're still going to have that evidence to record in their graphic organizer. Now, I should say that to create these activities, I've actually merged from 2 of my favourite experts in reading comprehension strategies, Sheena Cameron and Alison Davies. I've basically taken elements from ideas of each of them and put them together because, again, I wanted to create an activity that could be done collaboratively as a group rather than individually on a worksheet. And I wanted it to be done collectively because I wanted that rich, deep discussion and all of those collaboration and negotiation skills that come out as a group work together in one big screen. So, incidentally, in the notes section here, I've referenced the book that I got this excerpt from, and perhaps that is something that's within your copyright policy. The graphic organizer, I snapshotted off the graphic organizer, which is here. It's embedded, and at the bottom it tells us, here we go, look at that, you see, permission has been granted, okay. And I've put these 2 things together basically. Up the top I've added my own inferred type of question, and the idea is that the kids can bring one of these down and they're going to find in here the clues that will help them answer this question. Now, I've put 3 questions on the page. It might be that you've only given them 1. It could be that you want to let them have a choice, but remember you can always also add that element. Oops, it's no good, I want to colour in it. We'll do green. That element of randomness. So I've just covered over the questions there, and I'm going to right click and lock down that shape. The text is not locked down. I can still pick that up. There we go. And pull it down. So now there's random. Kids perceive certain questions as being easier or harder than others. I don't want them to be worrying about that. I just want them to grab a question and find the answer in the text. So again, it could be that they are highlighting or underlining ideas here and then writing them here. They could be recording their voices here. They could be opening that text box and grab that out and pull across, like so. Or there is one more sneaky little thing that they could do, which I'm going to show you on this next page. Okay, again, graphic organizer came from Alison Davies, and embedded there is her Blackline Master. And in the notes browser, same book for Sheena Cameron. And here are the questions. This is straight out of Sheena Cameron's idea, out of her book. The types of questions that I want the students to be thinking when they read this. because what they're going to do is they're going to build this ladder with clues about the character of Fred, and they're going to come to a conclusion at the top of what was inferred about his character. And the last sneaky thing that I was going to show you was that you can click on text and you can set an action so that words come out when you click on them. It's called extract text. So select your text, go to your action browser, go to the current selection, which it should automatically be on. Come down to E, because they're all in alphabetical order, extract text, apply changes at the bottom of the browser there. That's the sneaky step that sometimes trips us up. And now, if I want a word, I click on it and out pops the word. Okay, now if I want shaking hands, obviously have to do, click on both words. So sometimes it's not the best option if you're wanting whole sentences to come out, but if you're just after a couple of words as clues, it's ideal. Okay, there we go. So they're going to build that ladder and make their inference or make their conclusion about what is inferred about the character from that piece of text. And that brings us to the very end of our examples today. I'll just throw it out quickly to Laurie, and I'm not sure if Chelsea's on, but to see if there's any last questions before we go. One thing I will say, our emails are on the board there. If you're after a participation certificate, you can email me, claire.barber@prometheanworld.com, and I can email you back a participation certificate. It might be tomorrow when that happens, but I had a few questions about that earlier. Sorry?
So there aren't any questions, but the interesting thing is there's been quite a few comments about how people have forgotten how good the everyday use of the interactive whiteboard is as a teaching tool. So I think, thanks Claire, you've really shown people some really great ways of working with interactivity, and as I said, there's been a lot of comments about just saying that we have, we've forgotten about the everyday use of the interactive. They're still saying whiteboard, but we now
moving on to panels.
But, we're moving into panels. The panels are much easier to use, they're much easier to look at, once again, thanks for everybody staying. We've only had a few drop off. Some have dropped off for technical reasons, some have dropped off because, Claire always talks for too long.
I know, I'm so sorry. Honestly, I cut out half of what I was going to share.
Some of you who I haven't replied to that have given me their email addresses, I've sent that to Claire so she can answer some questions for you. So anyway, once again, that's all I've got to say, Claire. Well done.
Me too. Thanks everyone for joining us. Kai Fitiano, and we'll see you next time.